I just speak my peace, keep my peace.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 83 of the Speak My Peace podcast. As always, I'm your gracious host, Greg Lacey. Like we always do about this time, I hope that this episode will reach you all in good health, because we know how important that is right now. And aside from that, thank you all for tuning in to the Speak My Peace podcast, whether it's your first time, second time, third time, no matter the frequency. I appreciate you deciding to press play on this podcast, and I hope that whatever it is that drew you to this podcast, I'm able to retain your listenership, because that's what's most important. And I'm just feeling in a really thankful mood right now. It's going to be a short podcast. I give you all a heads up before I do head into everything. It's my birthday week. I'm recording this episode well in advance of its release. But I did just want to make sure that I did get an episode out to you all this week, rather than not deliver anything, because I feel like we've been in a great groove, and that's something I don't want to mess up. Despite me getting ready to go on vacation, I do want to make sure that I'm keeping my stride. But then again, I just want to say thank you all. We 83 episodes in. If you count in all the side episodes I had, if you want to count in the couple of IG live sessions that didn't make it to episodes, we damn near at 90, and that's a hell of a feat. I'm pushing for that milestone of 100, but getting to 80 episodes, sitting here by myself, doing everything by myself, as I reflect, like that's something that's not easy, and I don't want to ever portray as if that is a task that's easy. If I do even come off or portray anything as easy, I think that just speak volumes to my dedication to this and getting these episodes out to y'all. And also speak volumes to y'all support, because obviously without y'all support, I wouldn't be able to continue on with this podcast. So this community I've built of listenership with my podcast, the listeners in as I spoke about a couple episodes ago, in Belgium, Russia, in Korea, here in the States, whether that's Texas, whether that's Virginia, whether it's California, whether that's my listeners in Florida, whether it's my listeners in New York, from my time I spent in New York. I definitely appreciate each and every single one of you, because that's what's important right now, and that's what's pushing me to continue to go. So I don't want to start this podcast off without mentioning that, because that shouldn't go unnoticed. To get into the thick of things, again, I don't have too much. I just want to cover something that I've been seeing in the media. I meant to speak on it in the summer, I believe, when I saw incidents similar to this happening, and now that I see it occurring more and it's more prevalent again now, I feel like it's something that I have to speak up on, because I feel like this is a platform. I feel like this is a platform that I use to speak up against discrimination, injustice, anything of that matter, anything of that form, for any people, obviously mainly for my people, because my experience is that of a black man in America. But one thing's for sure is that I'm against discrimination and injustice for anybody, no matter what walk of faith you may be, no matter what race or religion, no matter what you identify as. None of that matters. I think discrimination against any human being is wrong. And what I'm speaking about now is just these incidents that I've been seeing covered in media, whether that's on Instagram or the news, is these young teenagers or these young adults attacking the people of the Asian community. If you all haven't been watching the news, or you all haven't watching the media, I guess like there's like some trend going on where like people are going into Asian communities and like harassing and abusing them. I seen a video to where it's like a old Asian man. He's walking down the street, and literally this teen jumps out of a car, and I think it was like two of them. It was. I don't know if he's a teen. It's a video, so I can't really determine what it was, but I assume this trend to be something that's popular amongst teens and young adults. Basically, they hop out of a car. It's a young Asian man walking down the street, and literally just he sprints to the Asian man, charges at him, and he just knocks him to the ground. And obviously the Asian man, he sustained like serious injuries because that like that type of force being put onto a adult, an athletic adult, it will cause some type of injuries. Like we see football players, they get hit real hard and they have to sit out for whether it's the rest of the game or they had to sit out a couple quarters. So one, they lost their breath, and for two, they may be injured. So just think about that same type of force being applied to an elderly man with no protection, with no helmet, with no pads, with no thigh pads, with none of that, and all for the simple fact of his race. He's been targeted. Like, that's something that's inhumane. I don't know where things like this come from. I don't know what makes them popular. I don't know what's going on in people's heads to carry out attacks like this, but it's not okay. And I'm not saying it's just okay because the video I seen was against an elderly man. Whether the man was elderly or whether the man was 25, like, people should not be targeted for anything based on their race. And the reason why I'm speaking about it is because the videos I've seen has been like young black teenagers who have been carrying out these attacks, and it's so detrimental to what we have going on in this country right now and what we've been able to accomplish in the past 365 days in this country as far as the fight for a fight against injustice and the fight for equality. It's like, on one end of the spectrum, you have people who are dedicated, who are vocal, people who are the foot soldiers, the people who are out there, trying to make changes to make sure that, we put an end to these injustice and inequality against our people, to make the world better for our future, for our youth. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have part of our youth carrying out heinous attacks like these ones that you can find on social media. Literally, you can type in on Instagram #StopAsianHate, I believe is a hashtag, and you will see these videos and you will see how brutal and you'll see how nasty they are. But it's just like, when I speak, going back to me speaking about the spectrums, is like this is the weight that's been carried by the people who are carrying these attacks, and this is the weight that's been carried by the people who are fighting for our progression. And it's just like, it's like a scale, and because this is heavier, it's really less progress, or it's less eyes on what should be prevalent and what should be covered in the media. Because we know, like, I speak on this again. I speak on, how we're covered, how we're talked about, how we're treating this America often. We know what we're up against. We know that if it's one thing that mainstream America does not want to do is paint us in a great light. One thing main America does not want to do is have the conversation about race. One thing main America does not want to do is have these conversations about injustice. And so, when they have something to distract, when they have something to distract the masses from that which is public, which is widely spread in the media and has been widely spread in the media for the past year, when they have something to distract that, they're going to go towards that. And so that's why I say this is detrimental, because it's going against our cause. It's going the opposite way, and we cannot have that. And this is not the first time this happened, or this is not the first time it's been covered in media. Over the summer, here in my hometown, there was the same attacks being carried out against the street vendors all across LA. It was young black men, riding around looking for street vendors and robbing them and beating them up. I think in one instance, there was a street vendor in LA and two young men, walked up on him, beat him up, and robbed him. And the old man ended up having to go to the hospital for his injuries, and the injuries were so bad that they turned fatal. Like, he spent a couple of days there and he ended up dying. And I don't remember if I covered this when they were happening, but I don't remember covering it, which is why I'm going back and covering it now. But it's just like, that's inhumane. And it goes back to the topic that I've been speaking about for the past 2 episodes, and our duties to build up these communities. We know that the generation of young adults, we know the generation of teenagers, you can't tell them much. I'm not in either of those groups, I'm like barely escaping it. Like, I'm not gonna tell you all my age, but again, I'm recording this episode because I'm getting ready to go on vacation for my birthday. But just like, there are people in my age group, and we are not in either of those groups, who act the same way. I myself acted that way for a while, but we know that the mind state of these people is like, you can't tell them anything. And where that got lost in comparison to other generation, older generations before us, is that sense of community. We don't have those communities to where, the person across the street, know my mom. The person across the street know my dad. They grew up together. They went to high school together. They went to college together, whatever the case may be. We don't have these things anymore. We don't have, events to where you're inviting your neighbor. We don't have, and granted, this is like, I'm speaking about the time before COVID. We don't have events to where, the whole block is showing up and we're getting to know each other and we're meeting each other and we knowing each other and things like that. To where we're able to report on, like, hey, I seen little Greg over there doing this thing at the park. I think you should know this. I don't want to be a snitch, but I think you should know because I don't want your son to be going down the wrong path. We don't have these things in place anymore because that sense of community within our community is not there anymore. And so you have things like this. You have young kids going out into neighborhoods and inflicting harm upon people based on their race, when for so many years in this country, and it's still today, we have been subject to those same type of treatments. And we know how inhumane they are, and that's why we have been fighting this fight for 400 plus years, because of how inhumane they are. So how can we continue to fight, that fight, and then allow our youth to then carry on the same mentality that our oppressors had against another race? It's inhumane. Going back, and I kind of fast forwarded, I didn't speak on it too much, but even just thinking about the street vendors in LA, like, we know if you're from Los Angeles or Los Angeles area, Los Angeles County, whether it's Long Beach, Compton, Inglewood, Watts, whatever the case may be, the majority are, I think all, I've never met any other street vendor that was not of Latinx descent. And those people, just speaking on my childhood, growing up in Eastside Compton, those people were pillars in our community. Just like the joy, not even just the street vendors, the paletero man, all of them, like they brought joy into our neighborhoods because of what that meant. Like, I remember being young, 6 years old, 7 years old, and the ice cream man comes through the block, and me and my cousins hopping on the back of the ice cream truck, and the ice cream man knows that we're on the back of the truck, so he's not going to be like speeding through the neighborhood, but he also understands what it is to be a kid. So he allows us. Granted, yeah, I look back and like, that's dangerous as hell for us to be doing that and for him to be allowing that. But he's aware that these things happen, and that kids want to be kids. So he allow us to ride on the back of the ice cream truck and then jump off, when it get too far, or it's crossing into other neighborhoods and things like that. Like, he understands that. But that type of thing brought joy to us. Even outside of just those joy rides on the back of the ice cream trucks, the idea of ice cream on a hot summer day, hearing the ice cream man jingle on a hot summer day, like, that brings joy. Like, just think about to my childhood and think about to me being a child. Like, why would I ever want to create a situation to where that joy is omitted from my childhood because this man is scared to come into my neighborhood, or this woman is scared to come to my neighborhood? Like, that should never happen. And then just aside from that, just from the human aspect of it, like, these people are out here hustling. I don't know how many hours of the day these people are out here, but I know they spend more than 12 hours, or probably about 12 hours a day, out in the hot sun, hustling so that they can provide for their family, whether it's their family here or it's their family back home south of the border, to where they're just trying to make funds to be able to provide a better opportunity, provide a better life for their children, for their wives, for their husbands, whatever the case may be. And then, but for us to be trying to stop them from doing that, it just doesn't make sense. And I'm not saying that only our people are carrying out these attacks, because I don't know that. I'm just going based off of what I've seen. But that is never okay. If there's anything we should learn from this, is their work ethic. Is because the dedication, the braveness to go into these neighborhoods to where you don't speak the language that these people speak. You don't understand, the rules in these neighborhoods that these people, live and cohabitate in. But you still understand that, this is a risk you have to take to better your future, to put your children through college, to put clothes on your children's back, to put food on your family's table. We have to think about that. Just the human aspect of it. We should never, ever, ever want to make someone's life harder, period. But we also should not ever want to make someone's life more difficult based on their race. Because we are way too familiar with that experience here in this country. And so I say all that to say that, man, if you know anybody personally who are committing these crimes against this Asian community, just have a talk with them. Let them know why it's not okay. Let them know our history. Because that's a lot of time is why certain things happen and why certain things are carried out is because we simply don't know our history, simply don't know what our people have been through, and we're so disconnected and we just like do whatever. But we have to get back to policing our youth, especially our young men, especially our young black men, because we know with like behavior like this, it leads down the spiral to other things in life. And we have to eliminate that. If we want better for ourselves in this country, we have to truly believe in that saying that the children or the youth are the future. And in order for us to believe that, we have to also be nurturing. We have to also be mentors. We have to also be an open book for them to learn from us and to learn from our mistakes. Because that's the key to our futures. If we want a better future for our children, our grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. That's the only way we can get there, is if we are constantly teaching and we are very vulnerable and open with things and the conversation that we're having with our youth. So again, if you know anybody that's carrying out these heinous acts, whether it's on street vendors, whether it's on innocent bystanders, just pedestrians walking around the street, just have a talk with them. Let them know why it's not okay. Tell them to stop. Discipline them if you have to, because this is not okay. And before we get out of here, one last thing I want to say that is not okay. First of all, huge shout out to Naomi Osaka, who won her 4th majors title this past week. That shouldn't go unnoticed. I speak about my fandom from tennis, growing from just the Williams sisters, and then seeing other young black women in the sport as well. Naomi Osaka right now is hitting a really good stride. I think during her match, I read that she has won her last 21 straight matches. I think she has won her last 21 straight matches. And she has a 4-0 record for her she has a 4-0 record for the last 4 major titles, or all her major titles, I believe. And this is a record that has not been achieved by anyone besides one person. That one person, not Serena Williams. But at this age, this is like a huge accomplishment for her. But the reason why I wanted to put the spot on Naomi Osaka and detail how great she is that we're watching the end of an era, but the birth of a new era. If you are a fan of tennis, if you're a fan of sports, whatever the case may be, and we have to usher this new era in properly. We can't be, spectators and fans that we have been in the past and pitting people against each other, because that creates a divide in, keeping people separate and not really enjoying their careers. I think back to Prince and Michael. We know that divide, and a lot of the times these things were created in media, but we also as fans participated in it as well. I think about Prince and Michael Jackson. It's like you couldn't be a fan of both. You had to be a fan of either. Think about Biggie and Pac. You couldn't be a fan of both. You had to be a fan of either. And getting more in relation to Naomi Osaka, just the passing of a torch, we think about Michael Jordan and Kobe. Like, for so long, people forced you to either be a Michael Jordan fan or to be a Kobe fan. You couldn't be both. For what reason, I don't know. But it was either or. When Kobe admired Michael Jordan so much, and Michael Jordan had so much love for Kobe as a young, mentee, that it was weird that we as fans, created this competition, this stigma around those two people, when in actual like real life, they loved each other and they adored each other. And so we didn't really get to witness the greatness that was becoming in Kobe in his early years, because people were still stuck on Michael Jordan. And then ironically, the same thing happened with Kobe. As Kobe's years was turning, people have not been fans of LeBron James since he entered the league because of the threat of his presence, what it did to the career, or what people believed, I should say, it did to Kobe's career. People did not want to welcome in LeBron James. Mainly people out here, because the majority of people out here are Lakers fans, and Kobe is God to them. And I won't say God, I shouldn't make that comparison, but Kobe is like the highest of the plateau to them. And because they didn't want that to be threatened by anybody, their only choice was to hate LeBron James. The ironic sense in that is that LeBron James came to their team nearly 20 years later and led them to a championship. So now they're all LeBron fans. But even going back into that thing, it was like Kobe was great, and Kobe was the greatest basketball player for so long. And then we had this young 18-year-old who was poised for greatness. And it was a group of fans who were so hyped and so, ecstatic about this young man and what he will achieve. And then we know LeBron James currently is one of the greatest players to ever play basketball. But there was still, on the other end of the spectrum, people who never acknowledged that, despite all the things that he accomplished. And because of that, there's like a thing in basketball to where it's like, when we speak about the greats, you couldn't say LeBron was one of the greatest because you had Kobe Bryant. You can say Kobe Bryant was one of the greatest because we had Michael Jordan. And you can never mention them in the same sentence. You can never enjoy both of their careers, because like you can't be fans of both. And I never understood that, but that's just the way we are as fans and spectators. And the reason why I bring up all these comparisons is because we now have a chance to write that with these two women in Naomi Osaka and Serena Williams. I don't want to say that Serena Williams is on the Serena was on tail end of her career. She's been a pro for 20 plus years, and I don't think she's going to play for another 20. She may play for less than another 10 years. So in sense of that, she's on the tail end of her career. But we know Serena Williams is one of the greatest athletes of all time, transcending across many sports. But we also have to understand that, despite her still being great, in the past couple of years, she has not been the greatest in her sport. This is not to say that her career is not the greatest career that we've seen across all sports. I'm saying in this present moment, we have to be able to acknowledge that despite her still being great, and despite her, coming back from giving birth to a child, and from her playing in a majors game while pregnant and things like that, and still winning, and her still, battling injuries and dealing with postpartum and all these things, and being able to make it to finals. And despite, she's lost a couple, and there's been some where she didn't even make it to the finals. But despite all that, she is still one of the greatest athletes of all time. She's probably the greatest tennis players of all time. And she is still one of the greatest current tennis players. But we still have to be able to acknowledge that there's this young 23-year-old who is hitting the stride. And the reason why I bring this up, because I remember they had a match. For those of you who don't know, the match prior to Naomi Osaka making it to the finals, she had to play Serena Williams. And I remember going to that match thinking, like, I don't think Serena Williams is going to win. I want her to win because I'm always cheering on my hometown heroes. But I know what Naomi Osaka has been doing in the past 2 years. And I think that she's unbeatable right now. And we saw that. And I think a lot of people also see this streak that Naomi Osaka has been on, and the stride Naomi Osaka has been hitting. And I hope that we're all just able to acknowledge that, like, right now we are ushering in a new era of tennis, and it may be a dawn of one of the greatest eras we may have ever seen. But we have to make it comfortable for Naomi Osaka to achieve what she needs to achieve rather than make it harder for her. Like, just her personally, like, she's one of the, seems like one of the most chillest, one of the most calmest, one of the most down to earth personalities. Like, just from seeing her interviews, seeing her speak and post game interviews and things like that, like, she is still like very humble. She is still very innocent. And no matter what, she still gives praise to the Williams sisters every chance she gets. You know, she didn't beat Serena. I think in the past 3 or 4 years, I think her record against Serena is like 5-1. So she played Serena 6 times and she only lost to her once. Mind you, this is the greatest athlete to have ever played the sport that she's currently playing in, and this is someone who she looks up to. This is her role model, someone she has been watching for her entire life, and she's beating her. She has the upper hand on her, and despite all that, she makes sure to give praise to this woman every time she wins a match. And I don't want the media to start to create, well, I can't control the media, but I don't want us to give in to this narrative the media will start to create, to where we're panning, or we're panning these two women against each other, and we're like not creating a space for one to excel as one begins to exit. Like, we shouldn't allow that. I say that across everything, whether it's sports, music, acting, school, whatever the case may be. We have a chance to right our wrongs in the past. We see what the aftermath of Kobe passing away. I seen a lot of sentiments after Kobe passed away. Like, you know, in basketball, I won't ever debate, you know, whether who's the greatest. I would just appreciate, you know, who's currently great and the people who are in the past. Like, this was a lot of people's sentiments after Kobe's passed because they didn't get to appreciate him while he was here, and they shunned him for most of his career because they were hanging on to what Michael Jordan had done. And so now that we have a chance, we're witnessing for our eyes in 2021 the dawn of a new era in the sport. We have to help usher that in. And that is all I have for the Speak More Peace podcast this week. Again, I can't thank you all enough. Before I do get out of here, I want to give a huge shout out to my mama. This podcast has been recorded on my birthday, or actually the day before my birthday. And I'm getting ready to go on vacation. Not going to be recording for a week. But as I think back on my life and I reflect on things, I know that I wouldn't be here where I am right now without that woman. That woman has made so many sacrifices, and I know that, you know, where she comes from and what she was up against and what she had to do is not easy. I've seen a lot of people go down this road and don't come out, you know, where I am now. And I literally owe everything in my life to this woman. And I intend to pay her back for that. But even just this podcast, like, I speak about how thankful I am for you all supporting me. Like, I wouldn't be able to record this podcast if it wasn't for her, if we've been honest. Like, I can reflect on, you know, how far I've made it in this podcast. I can reflect on my journey in this podcast and reflect on my journey in my life. But without those sacrifices, without her propelling me and putting me in certain places in my life and helping me and enabling me to excel, this podcast wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have the knowledge that I'm able to spew for 80 plus episodes. I wouldn't have the curiosity to research the things that I'm able to research. So again, I want to give a huge shout out to my mama. Thank you, mama. I love you. That's the Speak My Peace podcast for this week. We're gonna get out of here. My what to watch for this week. Dang, I had a what to watch for this week. My what to watch for this week. I gave y'all Sylvie's love story last week. This week I'm gonna give y'all Untold Hip Hop Story, or Untold Hip Hop Stories on FX. If you have FX, if you have Hulu, watch that. It's a great show. I think I'm on like episode 4, but just the stories and you all know I don't give synopsis on shows or whatever on shows, so I'm not gonna do that. But once again, my what to watch for this week is Untold Stories of Hip Hop on FX. I think they air on Thursdays. My best kept secret for this week is Alex Isley, Mine. I don't know how I missed this release of this song. I know I'm like a couple of months late, but Alex Isley is one of my favorite singers that a lot of people don't know about. And I ended up finding about this song months after release. But once again, my best kept secret for this week is Alex Isley's Mine. That's Speak My Peace podcast for this week. I'm out.